You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Welcome to the 2015 Royal Rumble post-pay-per-view discussion right here on AngryMarks.com. I am Angry Marks Podcast Network show host Killa Kev, surprisingly covering something WWE. You may have remembered a couple of weeks ago I went on a rant and said that I was done with WWE. Well, for the most part I was, but about an hour before tonight's broadcast, a gentleman talked me into coming back and talking about it because he was actually interested in doing a podcast. So I said, well, if you're interested, then I'll be interested. I can't let my roadie go it alone. Ladies and gentlemen, returning to the airwaves of the Angry Marks Podcast Network, coming from out of nowhere. No, it is not one Randy Orton. It is Frank Vaughn.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Okay, so here's how this thing went down. Today I was looking at the Royal Rumble card, and obviously it looked pretty shallow because, you know, they want to block off an hour, hour and a half for the Royal Rumble match itself. But I thought that a lot of interesting things would happen tonight to set up WrestleMania, and almost none of what I thought would happen ended up happening, except for one thing that we'll get to in a little while. But I decided to hit Killa Kev up. I had not heard his rant and had no idea that he was all anti-WWE at this point in his career. But thankfully and graciously, he decided to go ahead and grant me this request. I wanted to jump in tonight and just talk about a few things because, wow, I was surprised more by what didn't happen than I was by what did happen, Kev.
Well, let's talk about what didn't happen.
All right. First of all, what didn't happen is Brock Lesnar did not lose his title tonight.
No, surprisingly, not everybody figured this was going to be a swan song. This was it. If Cena didn't finish him off, then it was going to be Seth Rollins. If he didn't win it, then cashing in Money in the Bank at the end of the night. Didn't happen either. What we got here was nothing less than a total ass whipping by the WWE champion. And even when you thought he was down and out, he still had just a little bit left in the tank, and that little bit left in the tank was probably more than most WWE wrestlers have in their whole body.
Yeah, and, you know, they were playing up this idea that he broke a rib because Cena beat him unmerciful, you know, threw him into ring steps, hit him with ring steps, ate him a couple of times, then Rollins flew off the turnbuckle and, you know, threw the Spanish announce table on him. Brock Lesnar took a beating tonight and still left WWE champion. Now, I thought he would win the match, okay? I thought he would end up winning the championship match, but I still thought he was going to leave without his belt. Because I figured what would happen was that somehow, some way, Seth Rollins was going to cash in his Money in the Bank contract tonight. Because, first of all, let's look at this for just a second. So, Seth Rollins has been the Money in the Bank contract holder for many, many months now. Unfortunately for him, a lot of his run with that briefcase has occurred during the title reign of one Brock Lesnar. And what's unfortunate about that for Rollins is the fact that Lesnar has literally shown up on WWE television some 6 times in the last, 5-6 months since he got the belt. And so when the hell is he ever supposed to cash this thing in if Lesnar's never there? He missed like 3 or 4 pay-per-views after winning this belt, right?
Yep.
How does that even work? So I thought tonight was going to be his chance to do it because when the hell else is he going to do this? And as it turns out, he did not. Now, let me tell you how I thought that would happen. And this is not exactly an original thought. I saw some other folks online speculating about this possibility. But I thought that maybe what would end up happening is that, you know, since we've all heard that Brock Lesnar's getting ready to leave and go back to UFC, I thought maybe Heyman would turn on Lesnar tonight and help Rollins cash in that title belt, or cash in his contract to win the title. None of that occurred, obviously. Everybody likes to complain about Super Cena always overcoming the odds and beating up 10 men and always winning no matter what ends up happening to him and all that. Well, honestly, that's what we got out of Brock Lesnar tonight instead.
Well, at least Brock Lesnar is not there doing it month in and month out like John Cena is.
Well, that's both a blessing and a curse, though. Now,
right.
I've heard the argument that it's better for the championship if the champion is seen less frequently than what we're used to seeing him. A la Hulk Hogan back in the 80s when, you know, it was a big deal when he showed up on TV because he didn't show up every Saturday night or whenever it was they were televising. He didn't show up every week. He might show up and cut a promo, but he didn't wrestle every week. And so it's a big deal or it should be a big deal when the champion shows up, right? All right. I hear that argument. I understand that argument, but I think him showing up once every 3 months is a little ridiculous.
Well, there's a difference between showing up and wrestling every week and just being there frequently. You know, like you just said, you know, Hogan wasn't there wrestling every week, but you got a promo out of him. You got a decent promo package. You got highlights from a house show match that he did. Lesnar has just been nowhere on the map.
Yeah, and by the way, I gotta harken back to something John Cena said last week on Raw. It was kind of funny to me, actually. He threatened to win the championship this Sunday and then go home with it. And then where will you guys be, Stephanie and Triple H, if the champion's sitting at home? And am I the only one that heard him say that and went, okay, so what's new? Because that's what we've been going through with Lesnar?
Well, that was definitely John Cena really mocking how things turned out, because if you remember back, Brock Lesnar was the plan B that the Authority were looking for, and Paul Heyman brought to them, and then after that, they up and split. So great, the title's off John Cena, but the title is not back home with the Authority either. No,
and when I heard Cena cutting that promo last week, I was trying to decide whether he was being satirical or whether he just was completely missing the fact that belt wasn't on TV anyway.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's satirical. I mean, I know John Cena operates in his own little world, it seems like sometimes, but
I would hope that was not lost on him. I mean, the guy's been the face of this business for over a decade now, so hopefully his business sense is a little better than to say something like that earnestly. Okay? But anyway, so we've covered the fact that Brock Lesnar did not win or did not lose his title tonight, which was a bit of a surprise to me. Let's go on to the Royal Rumble match itself, Kev. And there were a number of things that jumped out at me tonight. First of all, and I'm just going to bring this one up front. Daniel Bryan lasted some 5 minutes in this match.
Yep.
If 5 minutes.
Something like that. He came in at what, number 10?
He was 10, 12. He was somewhere in there. He was early on. And I told my wife when he came in, I was like, well, because up to this point, Bray Wyatt, every time somebody came in, he would just throw them out. So for a good 4 or 5 entries there, it was just Bray Wyatt throwing people out of the ring and then standing there waiting for his next opponent. And when Daniel Bryan finally came out, I turned to my wife and I said, well, that's going to break that streak. This guy's going to last probably the rest of the match. If he gets thrown out at all, he'll be one of the last 2 or 3. And about 3 or 4 minutes later, over he goes.
Yep, he came in at number 10, and then he was the first one in after Zack Ryder got eliminated. Then we had to wait through Fandango and Tyson Kidd and Stardust and DDP before Daniel Bryan eventually got eliminated.
Now, I will say this. Was I surprised that DDP showed up tonight? No. I mean, he's been doing this, right? Wasn't he in last year's Rumble, too?
I don't remember if he was in last year's Rumble. I know he showed up for WrestleMania.
He was either at last year's Rumble or he was in the one before. I don't remember. But it didn't surprise me that DDP showed up tonight.
I think it was last year.
Yeah. What surprised me again is Daniel. Now, listen, coming into the Royal Rumble, I heard 2 names of people that were probably going to win this thing. If it wasn't one, it was going to be the other. The first was Roman Reigns, and the other was Daniel Bryan. He's fresh back off this 8-month injury. The guy's rolling. He's hot. Except for, wait a minute, no, he's not hot. His first match back on, was it Raw or SmackDown? I think it was his first match back on Raw. He lost.
Right.
To Bray Wyatt. Lost clean. And then he gets tossed over the ropes tonight fairly quickly. In other words, Daniel Bryan tonight basically got the Zack Ryder treatment.
Well, he got a little better than Zack Ryder, at least.
A little better, but that's Zack Ryder we're talking about. Daniel Bryan is one of the top 2 or 3 names in this business. I would argue that he, Cena, and Orton are probably the 3 top names in this business among active competitors.
I don't know. How much longer do you think Daniel Bryan is going to be there, though? I have doubts now.
That's why I'm wondering where this is going. And now the question is, okay, so if Daniel Bryan doesn't rate more than a couple of minutes in the Royal Rumble, like, what is his spot on the card now? I mean, he's jobbing to Bray Wyatt, which is, Bray Wyatt's up there on the card, but he's not at the top of the card. He's not up there where we're accustomed to seeing Daniel Bryan. Does this mean that Daniel Bryan is swan songing here, if I can say that? Is that what this means, or is this just simply a prelude to something else? I have no idea.
You know what? Instead of maybe calling him Zack Ryder, maybe he's Miz'd.
I started to use the Miz, but
I mean, really, if you think about it, though, remember how quickly Miz shot up to get WWE Championship, and then it just went right back down, and he comes back up, and then he goes right back down, and he's in the middle, and then he's back up, and then he's back down. Yeah,
except for about the last couple of years, he's just been down. I mean, unless you want to include him getting the Intercontinental title a couple of times up, which I do not. That Intercontinental title belt is a 10 piece of crap at this point, and everybody knows it, okay?
Well, but still, it's a belt, and plus he's got a couple of tag team reigns going on, and you have to admit during his tag team reigns, he floats between being somewhat popular with fans and, you know, everybody booing on him because he's the Miz, but his tag team partners have definitely benefited from his title reigns as well, so.
The one exception being R-Truth, who has benefited from nothing, ever.
At this point, R-Truth benefits by continuing to remain longer than JTG.
Yeah, R-Truth is making enough money to feed his family, and that should be his goal at this point. I mean, he's somewhere around 40, isn't he?
Yeah, he's definitely 40-something, and he's a new dad.
Right. So, you know, just drawing a steady paycheck ought to be good enough for him. They teased putting him at the top of the card at one point, and then they jerked it back really quickly. I think they gave him a WWE Championship match, and of course he lost, and then that was the end of that. But, so yeah, Daniel Bryan definitely surprised me tonight with how quickly he was eliminated. If they don't want to push the guy, which I can only assume maybe that's what they're saying here, if they don't really want to push him, then couldn't they at least let him be out there for the benefit of the crowd a little longer than he was?
Quite possibly. I mean, look at everybody else that they crammed into this. You had Fandango, you had Diamond Dallas Page, you had, who'd they have earlier? Boogeyman?
Bubba Ray Dudley.
Bubba Ray Dudley, yes.
Bubba Ray Dudley?
It was actually good to see him back.
It was good. I marked. But here's the thing. I haven't been paying attention to TNA because I don't give a crap about TNA. And anybody who's ever listened to me on this network knows that I'm on the record as saying I don't give a crap about TNA. I've tried to watch it, and at times I've thought it was mildly entertaining, but I've never found it to be compelling. The closest I came, though, was when Bubba Ray Dudley was Bully Ray in TNA.
Yes.
That's the closest I came to finding TNA even the least bit compelling. And now he's gone from there. Now he's, I guess, back in WWE, or was this just a one-off and then he's going to go back? I don't think Vince would have spent his money bringing Bubba Ray Dudley out there if he was just going to turn around and re-sign with TNA after this.
No, I haven't seen any inkling that, Bubba Ray is going to re-sign with TNA anytime soon. But just because he appears in the Rumble, which just happened to be in Philadelphia tonight, that's not a guarantee that he's back with WWE full-time either.
No. Now, I thought I read something a while back that they were considering making him a road agent, which would make sense because, I mean, who knows more about tag team wrestling than this guy?
There's not many.
And that tag team division needs some help right now. Now, that's assuming Vince gives a crap about his tag team division and wants to do anything about it, which I've seen no indication lately that that's the case. But I don't know. A couple of other surprises that I witnessed tonight. Well, I don't know if they're surprises. This one certainly wasn't, I guess. Did we witness the breakup of Goldust and Stardust tonight?
I don't think you did. I think it's just one of those things where when you get a bonded tag team into the Rumble, it's always kind of a little bit, well, you know what, we realize that eventually we're going to have to take on each other.
Yeah, but at that point they didn't have to. That was early in the match.
Well, they're both nuts too, so.
Then there's that, so yes.
And plus, they had to clear the ring for, Jack Swagger.
Don't get me started on Jack Swagger.
Poor Jackson. Ever since his manager broke his leg, he just seems lost.
Well, they've completely mishandled him since his first go-around with Rusev.
Let's be honest. They've completely mishandled him most of his career.
I agree with that. I thought he got the World Heavyweight title way too early in his career, and I think it screwed him. I really do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they kind of gave him the opportunity too early, then they took it off of him too early.
I think, honestly, the same thing happened to Miz. Now, that's part of it for Miz. The other part of it for Miz is he kind of sucks. But, I mean, in a lean year, I can see them putting the title on him when other people are hurt. Now, keep in mind, this is back when they had 2 world titles.
Right.
So every once in a while, somebody who may not ordinarily deserve it is going to get a run with it. I'm looking at you, great colleague, because, a couple people get injured here and there, and all of a sudden, you've got to put the title on somebody. So why not? Right?
Well,
that's kind of how it ended up happening for the Miz.
Warm body philosophy.
Right. Now, having said that, the Miz got to main event WrestleMania. It happened to be the one WrestleMania that I've ever attended. And he defeated John Cena. And of course, they booked it to where he had to have The Rock help him do it. So it's like, the Miz, even when he was champion, it was kind of like Chris Jericho's first run with the title, where he never won clean matches and he always had to get screw jobs to keep his belt. And, you can read about that in his book. He complains about that. But,
right.
He obviously rebounded later to have a very solid, almost legendary career. That's not going to happen for the Miz. It just isn't. Clearly, Damien Sandow is the breakout star of that duo. And I thought it was interesting tonight that when Sandow came out, the Miz tried to stop him and take the spot, and then he wound up getting hit by somebody. I don't remember who pushed him off the apron. And then Sandow looked at him and looked at the ring, and he was like, do I mimic what I just saw him do, or do I get in the ring and take my shot? He got in the ring and took a shot. Now, he didn't last more than 30 or 45 seconds, but I thought the choice he made there was an important one. And I'm hoping to see that storyline evolve as we go forward.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I figured that after tonight's tag team championship match, that we would see both of them in the Rumble and together, and it kind of fall apart. And I think WWE may have missed an easy opportunity there.
Well, instead, what we ended up getting is they were separate in the Royal Rumble, and it still kind of fell apart. But it needs to. That thing has run its course. It's not even funny to me anymore that Damien Sandow's running around mimicking the Miz's actions. That's played out. Okay? That was funny for the first 3 months they did it. It's time for that storyline to pick up some steam. It's time for those two to turn on each other. And it's time for Damien Sandow, clearly the more talented of these two performers, to shake the dust off his feet and move on from this cat.
You know what? Just as an aside on that, what I kind of like to see with this is eventually get to a point where Miz gets over just like Sandow, and then all of a sudden it's Sandow who goes completely heel on Miz and just snubs him.
Maybe. Honestly, I want to see Sandow do a face run. I really do. I think the crowd's clamoring for it. He's obviously a crowd favorite at this point. He's done the heel thing. We get it. He comes out with his bathrobe on and he's holding the mic like it's a glass of brandy. Come on. I want to see what he can do as a face. I want to see, because that to me is the true measure of a performer. Can you do both of those? We know you can be a great heel. Can you also be a good face? And see, that was Randy Orton's problem for a while there until he figured that whole dynamic out. Okay. I remember Randy Orton's first face turn when he won the World Heavyweight title as a member of Evolution, and then Batista and Triple H jumped him and beat him down. That whole thing. Randy Orton went on a face run after that was absolutely disastrous. I mean, it was an absolute abortion. It really was. So then he went back to being the legend killer, and he was the uber heel, and for years and years that's what he did. And then he finally figured out how to be a face and still be badass Randy Orton. Once he was able to figure that out, that's when dude really got over. You get over when you get it. I want to see if Sandow can get it.
So, other than the aside,
a couple of other notable things that happened tonight. You mentioned that we saw DDP. That's fine. He didn't last very long either. I got to tell you, I'm disappointed in the outcome of the Royal Rumble match, mostly because they let the cat out of the bag on this one months ago. Months ago, we heard reports that it was going to be Reigns and Lesnar at WrestleMania. Okay? And it's kind of like watching a movie you've seen over and over again. You keep hoping for a different result, but it never happens that way. I kept hoping tonight that somehow, some way, Reigns would not win the Royal Rumble. Not because I don't like Roman Reigns, or not because I don't think he deserves it, and not because I don't think he would be believable as a champion, but just simply because they let this cat out of the bag months ago. I mean, months ago I was hearing, it's going to be Roman Reigns. It's Reigns and Lesnar at WrestleMania. I heard this like back in September. And now here we are in January, and it's Reigns and Lesnar at WrestleMania. Talk about anticlimactic. And what was funny was that the crowd started booing when there were still 4 dudes in the ring. Let's see, it was Reigns, it was Big Show, it was Kane, and who was the other one?
Ambrose.
I guess it was it Ziggler?
Ambrose.
No, it was Dean Ambrose, that's right. When it came down to those 4 guys in the ring, the crowd started booing immediately because they knew that it was going to be Reigns. And then it was. And it's just like, really? I was praying to God that Lesnar would pull one of his moves from UFC, okay? And he would come out to the ring with his title belt and taunt the guy because, hey, you got me now, right? I saw him do this in UFC. I remember watching Cain Velasquez fight somebody and beat him to earn his shot at the UFC title. And Lesnar, who had been out with his diverticulitis issues, was actually at the event. And he came into the octagon after that fight was over. And he walked up to Cain Velasquez and he said, "That's a fake belt. I've got the real one. Now you got to go through me." I was hoping he would pull something like that tonight so that he could get laid out and then Rollins could come cash in and win the title. Just to give me something different. And then you could somehow work Lesnar into a triple threat at WrestleMania or something. I just did not want to see Roman Reigns win the Royal Rumble and go face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania simply because that's what they told me back in September was going to happen.
Okay, well, other than the fact that the cat was let out of the bag months ago, do you have a problem with this being your WrestleMania main event?
Yeah, I do. I have a major problem with it, but not for the reason you might think. The major problem that I have with this being the WrestleMania main event is we all know Brock Lesnar is leaving. We all know he's gonna leave. So now we know months in advance what the outcome of WrestleMania is gonna be. And maybe Rollins cashes in then, I don't know. But we all know that that Brock Lesnar cannot leave WrestleMania with that title. And I hate it when they let a guy walk into WrestleMania with the belt when everybody on earth knows that he's not leaving there with it. You ask me to suspend disbelief and watch this crap, and I'm asking you to help me suspend disbelief and watch this crap. Right? Doesn't the company have some responsibility to us to help us suspend our disbelief and watch this stuff?
Right, but there's a couple things I think you have to realize. First of all, we still have another pay-per-view to go before we get to WrestleMania. And 2, we've got 2 months to go with Seth Rollins still holding that Money in the Bank contract.
Well, I mean, at this point, I'm asking myself if their plan is to make him the first holder of that contract and never cash it in.
Well, Money in the Bank doesn't have to be cashed in now until the middle of the year.
Right. But at this point, again, as long as Lesnar has that title, there is no cashing in that contract because he's not going to be there. You watch. Okay, so WrestleMania is what, March 28th, I think it is?
Right.
Or March 29th, it's somewhere in there.
28th.
All right, that's 3 months from now. Let's do an over-under on the number of appearances total that Brock Lesnar makes in the next 3 months. I'm going to set it at 10 and go under.
I wasn't even going to do that. I was going to say 3.
Yeah, I'm setting it at 10 and I'm taking the under. Okay, and I'm being generous here. I could probably set it at 6 and take the under, like you said. But we're not going to see Brock Lesnar more than maybe 4 or 5 times in the next 3 months. That's it. He may not even wrestle another pay-per-view before WrestleMania. We still have we have one more pay-per-view before WrestleMania, right?
Yeah, we've got Fastlane.
Wow, what a name for a pay-per-view. But anyway, to me the most interesting part of this whole outcome of the Royal Rumble wasn't who won, but it was who showed up at the end. The Rock came out. Now, I'd read a report on AngryMarks.com. Go there and read about it, kids. I read a report on the website that said that The Rock was at the Royal Rumble tonight, but that his role wasn't exactly clear. Now, my immediate thought, and I talked to Stevie J about this on Facebook Messenger, my immediate thought about this is that The Rock would not come to the Royal Rumble unless he's setting up something else. Because why would he be at the Royal Rumble? Usually The Rock either makes a surprise appearance once in a while on Raw to just come out and cut a promo and say hi to the crowd, or he'll come to WrestleMania. Now, up until this past year, he had performed at the last 2 WrestleManias in a row. And then he had appeared at the one before it. So this past year was his 4th appearance in a row at a WrestleMania. But he didn't wrestle last year. He just showed up for the kickoff segment with him, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair. Or I'm sorry, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Ric Flair wasn't even there. It was him, Hogan, Austin.
Right.
And that was a good segment, okay? You know, The Rock came out, they got that out of the way up front, and then they went to the back, and then we got on with the show. No big deal. But now he's showing up at the Royal Rumble, and something interesting happened there. He not only came out there and chased off Kane and Big Show after the match was over with, or so we thought, because Rusev was laying out there pulling an edge, okay? He not only chased off Kane and Big Show after they were eliminated, But then afterward, he had an interesting stare down with Triple H. The match was over. Roman Reigns wins. He's celebrating. The Rock's out there holding his hand up. And then Triple H and Stephanie walk out on the ramp and just stand there and stare at him with their mouths open like, what the hell? And I thought there was this long stare down between The Rock and Triple H that makes me wonder now if they're setting up a match for WrestleMania.
I don't know if they're setting up a match. I think my speculation on this is going to be that the reason that The Rock showed up was to have Roman's back. And he doesn't want to see the Authority screw over Roman Reigns like they've done with Daniel Bryan and like they've done with John Cena, because, Roman Reigns isn't one of their favorite cats.
But what is he prepared to do about it is my question.
Well, obviously, as you saw tonight, once the J&J, once it came down to Big Show and Kane, he was willing to get in there and clear that out a little bit and make sure that they didn't get the upper hand.
Right.
So, Rock, it looks to me like Rock is all back to boots and asses.
But then the stare down afterward between him and Triple H. Now, I hope they do have a match. They're both still capable of going. We know Triple H is going to wrestle at WrestleMania. He's going to wrestle somebody. Okay? Maybe it's Daniel Bryan. Maybe that's what the plan is for Daniel Bryan. Maybe Daniel Bryan's being saved for a really get rid of the Authority this time angle. I don't know, because he still has business with them from way back. Okay? So maybe that's why Daniel Bryan didn't factor into the Royal Rumble tonight. But then The Rock with this stare down, I don't know. I'd heard reports a while back that The Rock wasn't even going to be at WrestleMania this year. There were no plans to book him, is the way that was put. Now, when the wrestling business tells you there are no plans at this time, what does that usually mean?
Somebody's got a plan.
Usually there's a plan in place. They just don't want you to know what it is. In other words, I'm going to tell you, Kev, some of the sweetest moments I've ever seen in professional wrestling history were the unexpected swerves, the soft swerves, the subtle swerves, but these ham-fisted swerves like, no, we are not going to do that, and then watch them do it. It's at this point, when they tell me something's not going to happen, I almost expect it to happen.
Right.
I almost expected CM Punk to show up tonight just because I've been told for a year now that he's never coming again. So that's kind of where my head's at with this whole thing these days. So when The Rock says I'm not wrestling at WrestleMania, I'm almost expecting that he will.
I don't know if he'll wrestle at WrestleMania. I think just my opinion on it right now is he's going to be there to be Roman's muscle, to be there in his corner. And part of the reason I say that is because I know you didn't get to see this, but the after show, they had Todd Phillips in the back, come up to them both and start interviewing, and it was almost as if Roman Reigns didn't need to be there at all. It was 90% Rock talking, cutting the promo for Roman.
So in other words, The Rock was basically being his Paul Heyman.
Yeah, you're right. Except it kind of came off a little bit almost like Rock upstaging his own cousin. And it didn't need to be, because Tom would ask a question, Roman would start the answer, and then Rock would jump in and talk for like 3 or 4 minutes, threaten to smack the smile off of Todd Phillips' face, and then say, now you need to ask this guy the question.
Okay.
Well, Todd was, but you cut him off, and, I know there's been criticism of Roman's promo skills, and some of the promos he's done, but then there's also the fact that we've heard that it's Vince McMahon writing them. So I don't know if this is to try to, just have Rock cover it up until he gets better, or if this is the Rock's way of rubbing elbows with him, passing the torch a little bit. I don't know.
Well, let me say a couple things about this. First of all, Roman Reigns is awful at cutting promos. He's very bad. That whole Jack and the Beanstalk bull crap that he pulled a couple of weeks ago was painful to watch. It really was. Now, was it the material or was it the deliverer? Probably some of both. Maybe Vince is writing this material and maybe it's bad, okay? But you have to ask yourself, why is Vince taking it upon himself to write this guy's promos for him? Probably because he's so bad at it. Now, conspiracy theorists can chew over whether Vince is purposely tanking him with these bad promo materials or not. I don't know. But the question I have to ask in light of him winning the Royal Rumble is Roman Reigns ready for prime time? Is he ready for that big push? Is he ready to be the WWE champion?
I think he will be.
I think he will be, but I don't think he is.
At this point, I think he's close to it. I think after this next pay-per-view, we'll see it.
Now, having said that, you have to look at the other part of this, okay? The Rock is unquestionably the best promo cutter in the history of this business. So, my thing is, who better to put with Roman Reigns to maybe teach him how to cut a promo than The Rock? This guy is in rare company with the likes of Ric Flair, and let me think who else might have been as good at cutting a promo as The Rock and Ric Flair. And I'm not really coming up with anything. So other than Ric Flair, who better than The Rock to put with Roman Reigns to teach him how to cut a promo?
Right, but do you put him together on TV and have The Rock basically look like he's upstaging him?
Well, and that's the other part of it is unfortunately when you include The Rock in anything, he's gonna upstage whoever he's there with. Other than the one exception I can think of was last year when he had Stone Cold and Hulk Hogan in the ring with him. Okay. I mean, Hulk Hogan these days, God love him, has gotten a little senile, okay? He thought they were in the Silver Dome instead of the Superdome. But, I mean, at this point in his life, The Rock is a Hollywood megastar. He's the biggest action star in the business right now. He's The Rock. How do you put him with anybody and him not upstage them?
Well, I mean, if the point was to try to teach young Mr. Roman's way to cut promos better, then...
Well, and see, with The Rock being involved in WWE at all, that's always the question you have to ask. How involved is he going to be? Like, are we going to see him more often now leading up to WrestleMania because of this angle that he just inserted himself into? Or was this just a one-off tonight, and then you might see him again right before it? I don't know. And by the way, it's about time for HBK to start making his weekly appearances leading up to WrestleMania again here soon. So,
oh God, no more.
Well, it's going to happen.
I mean, I know they called him Mr. WrestleMania, but no more. I mean, let's lay off him for a little bit.
Well, no more of him, no more of Undertaker. It really is time to put some of these things to bed, but they're not going to do it. They're not. And now that The Rock is involved in this angle with Roman Reigns and the Authority, I mean, he went out there and beat the hell out of two of the Authority's henchmen tonight. So he's in this angle now. Now, whether he's going to be in the angle as a regular cast member or not is another question. Because the guy does have another life, a much more lucrative life elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be around for a long time, but I can see him sticking around through Mania and then tapering off.
Well, and that's probably going to end up being his battle rhythm going forward until he decides he's done for good. I was all about him being inducted into the Hall of Fame this year, too, but now he can't be. That cannot happen now. And the reason that cannot happen is because of what we just discussed. How does The Rock not upstage whoever he's around, right?
Right.
And I'll be damned if I want anybody to upstage Randy Savage's induction this year.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
And if you put The Rock on that roster, then you just took a lot of the luster off of Randy Savage being inducted.
Yeah.
So The Rock cannot be inducted this year. Undertaker cannot be inducted this year. These things must not happen.
No, those guys all deserve their own separate inductions.
Yes, they do. They're all headliners in their own right. Last year, the big deal was Ultimate Warrior. And I braced for it because I thought they were going to induct Undertaker last year. I thought that would be his last WrestleMania. I thought he would go out with a win. Turns out I may have been wrong about all of those because, the last thing I read is that he's actually trying like hell to get geared up for one more this year.
God, let's hope that's just a nasty rumor.
I would hope so, especially considering that the rumor I'm hearing is that he's supposed to be wrestling Sting. And, that's really what I want to see is a combined 105 years of wrestler in the ring at WrestleMania. That's exactly what I want to see.
That's just a bad idea. Consider if anybody has watched Sting over the last couple of years in TNA, you've noticed his quality go down pretty rapidly, and that's going to happen when your knees are shot.
Yeah, I will say this, though. I like how they're using Sting right now. We've seen him exactly twice.
Right.
And they were both very important appearances that he made. Now, well, the first one I thought was important until they went back and undid that a month later.
Yeah.
But this last one was pretty important last week when he showed up.
Right.
So I like how they're using him sparingly. That's the guy you use sparingly. Not your world champion, Brock Lesnar, but that's the guy you use sparingly. You only bring him out when something needs to be set right. He's always been, ever since he got rid of the Surfer Sting gimmick and went to the Crow Sting gimmick, He's always been that vigilante. He's always been that guy. I was a WCW fan in the 90s. That dude was the sense of justice in WCW. And now he's brought that same feel to WWE. And with the Authority running roughshod over the entire roster right now, somebody needs to be that counterbalance. I just pray to God that does not lead to a match between Triple H and Sting at WrestleMania.
No, I mean, as much as fantasy booking as it is, we've got video games to cover that now if you want to relive that. It doesn't need to happen, and while Triple H looks like he's in ring shape, and I'm sure with all these DVD videos workout videos he's selling right now, I don't need to see Triple H in the ring anymore. He's had his day in the sun. Sting has had his day in the sun. Let him go.
I don't mind seeing Triple H in the ring one more time if that leads to the end of this Authority bull crap once and for all.
Well, I could accept Triple H in one more match if that was going to be the last match of all time ever. He's still in good enough shape to pull it off.
Trademark to Christian, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, Sting though, no, Sting is in no shape. I mean, the three men in professional wrestling that I never really want to see in a wrestling match again: Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, and Sting.
I will, and I would add Undertaker to that list.
Well, yes, Undertaker, you're right. I'm sorry, I was bereft.
Sting does have good use, though, to WWE. I would submit that if we do finally get rid of the Authority, and Sting can even help make that happen in a limited capacity. We get rid of the Authority, we need a general manager, right?
Right.
Okay, there you go.
And he doesn't have to be a anonymous Raw general manager.
No, he does not. Oh my gosh. You know, if for no other reason but that they stopped this nonsense of different people general managing Raw every week again, I was glad to see the Authority come back so that at least somebody was in charge. I just wish they'd found somebody else to do it. I would, honestly, at this point, I'm so sick of this Authority crap, I would rather see Eric Bischoff come back.
Or Teddy Long.
Well, holla, playa. But anyway, Kev, that pretty much covers my observations on the Royal Rumble. In my opinion, really none of the other matches were even worth talking about. I mean, I spent most of my time focusing on the Rumble match itself and then on the championship match because those are the two biggest things going into WrestleMania. And a couple questions I'll leave our listeners with on my way out the door, though, is number one, what's next for John Cena?
Well, interestingly enough, after the pay-per-view, they went backstage to interview John Cena about his disappointing loss. And in the middle of that, Rusev storms in, throws whoever it was that was interviewing out of the way, snatches the mic, and starts cutting a promo in Russian. And Cena's just standing there, hands akimbo, and he's like, really? Really? You're going to be doing this? And finally, kind of gives Rusev a nudge. Rusev doesn't move. He gives Rusev another nudge. Rusev turns around and gives him a big shove back, and then all of a sudden they're forehead to forehead with each other, and you got half the locker room trying to pull them apart.
Okay, more ham-handed booking. And I can tell you how that one's going to end. Because I've been hearing for a few weeks now that it might be Cena and Rusev at WrestleMania. And I can tell you how that's going to end. Cena's going to beat him.
Yeah.
Rusev has to lose at some point, right?
Right.
Cena's going to beat him. He may drop a couple of matches to him on the way to WrestleMania, but Cena's going to beat him Cena is not going to job to Rusev at WrestleMania. Rusev is an up-and-comer, but he ain't nowhere near the top of the card right now to be beating some John Cena at WrestleMania. It's just not going to happen.
But at the same time, he definitely needs somebody on the upper level to start giving him matches.
Yeah, but this isn't the upper level. This is the stratosphere, dude.
Right.
This is John Cena. You want somebody in the upper level to give him matches? Wrestle Kane. Wrestle Big Show. Wrestle some of these gatekeepers.
Yeah, but most of those gatekeepers are heels, and Rusev's a heel, and...
Okay, so at this point, wrestle Daniel Bryan. What else is he doing right now? Wrestle Dolph Ziggler. But they're giving him the guy? That's not going to end well for Rusev. And ask Bray Wyatt what happens when you lose to John Cena at a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, but then again, Bray Wyatt's still around. He did very well in the Rumble this year.
Yeah, but he got tossed over like a sack of potatoes, and it was basically Kane and Big Show that just unceremoniously dumped him over the ropes.
Well,
he ain't ready for prime time. I mean, and I'm telling you right now, listen, I've never been a Cena hater, but at this point, even I can see that wrestling John Cena at WrestleMania, if you're an up-and-comer, is a dead-end street.
I don't know if I'd say it's a dead end street, but at the very least, I think if you put him up against Cena, it starts to make people feel like, here he's gone on this monster run with the United States title, and he's beaten all comers so far. I don't think getting beat down by Cena hurts him at all.
I don't think it helps him either, though. I mean, it gets him nowhere, really.
The Rock came in a while back and handed him an ass kicking, and he took the ass kicking and he rolled on.
Yeah, but again, that's The Rock. The Rock was only there for one night. Everybody knew that. That wasn't really an angle. That was just an oh, by the way.
Right. It's an oh, by the way, but it's an oh, by the way by look. The Rock could have had his pick of anybody's ass to kick any night. Why Rusev?
Well, but then again, why not? Rusev's the United States champion. It wasn't going to set him back any. The Rock was going to go out there and beat somebody's ass. It had to be somebody that believably The Rock would want to beat the hell out of. So Rusev made sense in that context. Let me say two things about Rusev, though. Number one, in order for him to be more believable as a badass, he's actually going to have to lose a match.
Right.
At some point, we're going to have to believe that whoever's standing across from him in that ring actually has a chance to beat him. Right now, he's getting this Goldberg treatment, and it's not helping him. He's not going to get anywhere because when he finally loses that first match, he's going to lose a lot. He's going to wind up being Umaga from 2007 is what's going to end up happening. I don't like the way they've done this. I really don't. I think that I'm going to go back to that first feud with Jack Swagger. I thought he should have dropped he could have won the feud, but he should have at least dropped a match in that feud.
Right.
If he had done that, that would have, again, when he finally went over Jack Swagger and beat him, it would have made it more special. But now it's like you just beat Jack Swagger 4 times in a row. And then they went back to that and did it another 3 times later on. And by this point, it's like every time Jack Swagger comes out there to face Rusev, there's no way he's winning. There's no way he's winning. If you'd given him just one win in this whole feud, then the next time he comes out, you think, well, maybe. And that makes it even more impressive when Rusev does beat him because he beat a guy that is capable of beating him. But so far, nobody's beaten him. And he's been there like nearly a year now.
Right.
So somebody's going to have to beat him sooner or later. I really wish it wasn't John Cena for the first time at WrestleMania. That's not going to be good. And Kev, that speaks to a bigger problem, the one that I just mentioned earlier with the result of the Royal Rumble. We know how this is going to go now. Suddenly, it's not just the card at WrestleMania that's beginning to shape up, it's the results. We're already looking at the card as it's taking shape, and we already know how it's going to go. Good thing WrestleMania only cost $9.99 this year. Because if I had to pay $56 or $65 for this, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, definitely. If we were looking at the old prices 2 months out, you're looking at a really hard sell.
And let me give you a little bit of irony here, okay? If WWE really wants this network to take off, and they really want this network to succeed, and they want it to be profitable, then they're going to have to stop giving us what we paid for. They're going to have to stop giving us $10 worth of pay-per-view.
Yeah.
You give me $56.95 worth of pay-per-view for the $10 I paid, you're going to get a hell of a lot more people paying $10 to see it.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. For the last year, I've really felt that most of the time, most of the pay-per-views that I've watched have given a lot more value than the $10. I think this is really the first one where I felt like I only got the $10. And ironic enough, it's on the month where I've canceled my subscription.
But see, Royal Rumble is unique from every other pay-per-view on the schedule for one reason, okay? The Royal Rumble is not about itself. In other words, it's not a pay-per-view that sells its own value. The Royal Rumble's value is predicated on what it does to shape WrestleMania. The whole entire point of Royal Rumble is WrestleMania. The point of WrestleMania is WrestleMania. The point of SummerSlam is SummerSlam. The point of Night of Champions is Night of Champions. The point of Royal Rumble is WrestleMania. The Royal Rumble isn't even about itself. It's about a different pay-per-view. And if this one went badly, and it didn't go badly, it didn't go great. It wasn't a great pay-per-view at all. But even more damaging is the fact that it's already setting up a lackluster WrestleMania, in my opinion. Unless some drastic things happen in the next 8 weeks, we're in for a disappointing WrestleMania this year.
Yeah, I mean, the next Fastlane is definitely going to have to cover a lot of ground to get people in, and they're not going to have a lot of time to do it.
Well, and in my opinion, it's going to have to undo a lot of what got done tonight. Dolph Ziggler is still in Nowheresville. Now Daniel Bryan's in Nowheresville. Dean Ambrose is really sort of in Nowheresville, because what's next for that guy? No clue. Basically, WWE right now is all about three people. It's all about John Cena, it's all about Brock Lesnar, and it's all about Seth Rollins. Nobody else seems to matter anymore. And that's bad for business. Kev, that's really all I've got tonight.
All right. Well, we'll run down the rest of the card real quick because, like you mentioned, it was kind of lackluster, and these were matches that just kind of seemed to either continue or resolve their own issues rather than point to WrestleMania. Our kickoff pre-show match was Antonio Cesaro and Tyson Kidd defeating Biggie Langston and Kofi Kingston in tag team action. It was a fairly good match, I will admit. The crowd was completely against the New Day. Now, granted, pay-per-view is in Philadelphia, so Philadelphia is a little bit more heel-friendly. New Day is all about being the over-uber baby faces. They got no love at all, but I have to wonder how much of that is the fact you're playing with a heel crowd there and just how hot Cesaro and Tyson Kidd have gotten with fans in general.
I like Cesaro and Tyson Kidd as a tag team because for a couple reasons. Number one, what the hell else are you going to do with these two guys? And by the way, I want to say something about Cesaro. I've been on the record for a long, long time as not being a believer in this guy and not thinking that he deserved to really get pushed and not thinking that he was ever really going to make it. Of those three statements, the only one that I think is true is at this point is that he's not going to make it. But unlike before, I no longer think that's his own fault. I think the guy's getting a raw deal. I think he should be pushed higher than he is. I think that Vince McMahon has such a hard-on for Seth Rollins right now that really nobody else outside of him, Brock Lesnar, and John Cena are going to get anywhere for a while.
Right.
They just, for whatever reason, they've decided that Seth Rollins is the guy that they've said it on camera, but I think behind the scenes it's true as well. They've pinned their entire future to this guy now. And there are some other dudes out there that I think are worthy of that same consideration, and they're just not going to get it. Cesaro's one, Ambrose is one, Bray Wyatt is one, and I forgot to mention Roman Reigns at the top end of all this.
Right.
But right now, Vince McMahon is all about him some Seth Rollins, and I don't get it. I mean, he's a great performer, he really is. I wish he'd do something about that stupid hairdo, but notwithstanding. The guy does deserve to get pushed. I just wonder why he's the only one outside of the established stars that's getting pushed.
I can't answer that one.
I don't know that anybody can. Even Daniel Bryan exists far beneath Seth Rollins at this point.
Right.
Daniel Bryan?
No idea.
Yeah. So, but I like Cesaro and Tyson Kidd together. I think they're beginning to find some chemistry. I like the spot they did a couple weeks ago with Cesaro picking somebody up and putting them in the swing, and then Tyson Kidd hitting them with a drop kick. I thought that was pretty clever. So I kind of like these two together as a tag team. Now, the New Day, dude, when I saw the promos early on, when I saw that they were going to come out with this Kirk Franklin and the family gimmick, I knew this was going to bomb. I just did. It had the feel from Jump Street of taking three guys that they didn't know what else to do with and just seeing if this would stick to the wall.
Yeah,
at this point with Big E and Kofi Kingston, it really is like they're just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah, I definitely think it's just a gimmick kind of thrown together just to give them something to do. But hey, at least they put them together as a group, and at least it looks unified and looks decent. It looks a lot better in execution, in my opinion, than what three-man band did.
But that's what they did to them. They three-man band them is what they did. And maybe it's coming off a little better than three-man band did, but that's basically what's happened. Remember Drew McIntyre being the chosen one?
Yeah.
And that wasn't just a tagline that he gave himself, kind of like Zack Ryder being the internet champion. That's not something he crowned himself with. That's something Vince McMahon actually said about him.
Yeah.
This guy is my future. This guy is my chosen one. I'm going to push this guy to the moon. And in the end, he went out with a whimper, tag teaming with Heath Slater. That was the end of his career. And Jinder Mahal. That's what ended up happening to the chosen one. So whenever you take three guys that were supposed to be big stuff and you end up throwing them together in a group just to see what happens, you've already basically written them off. I strongly suspect that sometime within the next 12 months, we're going to be seeing releases for Kofi Kingston and Big E Langston.
Quite possibly.
at least Big E. I really do. I mean, Kofi Kingston is a good utility player. He's a good guy to throw into the Royal Rumble matches because he's always going to have great spots. Although this year they didn't let him do that. This year he got disposed of rather quickly. So that tells me where he's at on Vince's radar right now. They didn't even let him do his parkour stuff. No,
but they kind of didn't need to because this year he got saved by Adam Rose's Rosebuds.
He did, and that was a funny spot, especially considering Adam Rose got thrown over the top rope right behind that, and they just stood there and watched him hit the ground. I mean, that was funny. Okay, yeah. That was funny, and that also speaks to where Adam Rose is on Vince McMahon's radar right now.
Well, but let's be honest, with Kofi Kingston, you can't have him doing that spot every year because the longer he goes on doing it, the less value you actually get out of it, much like John Morrison. Remember?
You know what? I'm glad you brought up John Morrison. I was just about to say that. Kofi Kingston at this point is John Morrison. John Morrison's wrestling in Mexico now.
Yeah, and he's doing an actually really good job at it, but it's not WWE.
No, he's doing good for Mexico. But probably most of our listeners might not know that unless we mentioned it tonight.
Yeah.
John Morrison's wrestling in Mexico now. That's what happened to him.
Let's see, he's what? He's on Lucha Underground now?
Yeah.
Okay. It was either that one or the one that they were showing on WGN. I couldn't remember which one.
And this time next year, I may be able to go to a live show in San Juan, Puerto Rico to see Kofi Kingston.
Well, that'd be pretty awesome.
For him. Sort of. Not where he's at now. But that's what his career's come to. And for what it's worth, Adam Rose kind of reminds me of Paul Burchill in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is because they both wear eyeliner, but most of it is because they're talented workers that just got saddled right out of the bag with crap gimmicks. I mean, somebody decided to turn Paul Burchill into Johnny Depp, okay? And it was clever for a minute, but then it just fizzled.
Well,
especially when they saddled him with Katie Lee, this sister of his. Now, with Adam Rose, he got saddled with a bunny. Now, I know the bunny's gone now, but dude, 10 years from now, if he never wrestles another match, 10 years from now, all anybody's ever going to remember Adam Rose for is that damn bunny.
Yeah.
Okay, he's basically in the same league with Doink the Clown at this point. That's what's happened to his career. And there ain't no coming back from that. When it's to the point now where your stupid rosebuds won't even catch you to save your ass, he's done.
Right.
So
speaking of done, moving on from that, the Ascension got a win over the New Age Outlaws in our opening match on the pay-per-view.
Yay, they beat a couple of 48-year-olds. Awesome. That means great things for their career going forward.
Well, actually, I do think this is kind of a big deal because, I mean, granted, New Age Outlaws are old. You know, I mean, they're actually so old that several years ago we started making jokes about them being the old age outlaws. But, you gotta admit, we've seen them in action off and on for the last year back in WWE now, and they look in about as good shape as any team on the roster.
Well, and I mean, to their credit, they were just WWE Tag Team Champions, like a year ago?
Yeah, they briefly held the belts again.
But then again, how many hands have those belts passed through in the last year? So that's not really saying a lot.
I mean,
yeah, that's a sad commentary on the state of your tag team division, by the way, when you have to bring in a couple of mid-40s guys to hold your belts.
Yeah, that's true. But at least it was a refreshing change in the landscape for a little bit, and to New Age
Outlaws. Sweet nostalgia, that's all it was.
Well, I mean, and to the New Age Outlaws credits, they were able to carry those belts credibly. I mean, it's not like they were given this just because they're best friends with Triple H. They actually went out there and they did it justice.
Hey, I'll grant you that. They were able to credibly carry belts that have no credibility.
Touche. But the Ascension, after their debut and the verbal ass kicking that they've been getting, and the literal one they got on Raw this past Monday, they finally got a little bit of revenge, and they needed this win. They desperately needed this win because after everything that's happened the last couple of weeks, I swear if they lost another match, no matter who it was to, I was just thinking, you know, writing's on the wall for them. It's done.
Let me say something to Vince McMahon and the Ascension, okay? Now, I appreciate him pushing some NXT stars up to the main roster and giving them a chance. But here's the thing. If you don't want your tag team to be called a bunch of cheap Road Warriors ripoffs, then stop dressing them like the Road Warriors.
Well, you know,
why are they coming out with mohawks and spiked shoulder pads, and you don't want them to be called cheap Road Warriors ripoffs?
Well, in
really?
in NXT though, I mean, it was, essentially the same. The only difference is on NXT, they didn't have to go around comparing themselves to the Road Warriors or the Powers of Pain or Demolition. I mean, they were there as their own men. They came in and they kicked ass and left. There's no reason they couldn't have continued that in WWE. Go ahead and let the fans make the comparisons. Let their opponents make jokes about, them being Road Warrior light or whatever, and then have the Ascension completely kick their ass and prove them wrong. But
here's the problem with that, though, Kev. Here's the problem with that. A lot of people don't seem to understand that just because you're successful in NXT does not mean it's going to translate to the main roster. Okay? Right. Now, in these guys' case, I'm not going to speak to the state of this in general, but in these guys' case, how many people that are watching NXT right now, honestly looking for that next diamond in the rough to really turn the business around, okay? How many people are watching NXT right now that were watching the Road Warriors 30 years ago?
Probably not as many as you'd think.
Probably not very many at all. So that's why they were able to get away with this in NXT, and they're not getting away with it up here.
Well, like I said, I think the big difference is NXT, they didn't have to talk about that. And for whatever reason, Vince McMahon or somebody in the back told them, this is what you need to say. And
I almost think they got set up with this gimmick so that they would fail. I'm beginning to understand. I'm beginning to believe that.
Well,
I really am, because there's no way this was going to work.
Well, that's the rumor that once they got brought up, Vince McMahon intentionally wrote this because he's pissed off at how successful NXT guys have been with getting over.
Right.
I mean, and that makes totally no sense to me, but what other explanation than you have other than Vince McMahon is daft and jealous of his son-in-law?
Bo Dallas notwithstanding, but anyway.
Well, yeah.
I honestly believe somebody's tanking them with this gimmick, because this gimmick is crap. All right. Now, the thing is, like I said, it's not, NXT has a niche viewership. It really does. They're not pulling the same ratings Raw is, not even close.
No.
Not even a fraction of what Raw is pulling, because not the same people are watching this. Now, I'm not disparaging NXT and its usefulness in the grand picture of things. I'm really not. It's a good breeding ground for future stars. But they've got to come to the main roster without the expectation that they're going to walk in and achieve automatically the same success that they did in NXT. This is the same thing as somebody thinking they can drive a go-kart on a dirt track and then walk into Talladega and climb in a stock car and win the race. It's not going to happen. You've just got to take NXT for what it is. It's a training ground.
Right. And you know what? I'll make a comparison between NXT and OVW. If you remember back when OVW was the WWE developmental territory, there's a lot of guys that came through whose gimmicks in WWE were in many cases vastly different from what their gimmick in OVW was. I mean, John Cena.
Yeah, the prototype.
The prototype. Batista was Leviathan.
Well, and even going back way before OVW was a thing, okay? Let's look at guys that cut their teeth in WCW and then went to WWF, or vice versa. Anybody remember a wrestler by the name of Terra Rising?
Well, of course.
He's now the COO of WWE.
Right, but you have to admit, when he finally arrived in WWF, Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, was not very much different from the character that left WCW.
No, but he understood that he wasn't going to be able to do it the exact same way. Dude, the Ascension, they needed to find another way to get them over. If you come to the main roster with the exact same gimmick you used in NXT and it doesn't get over, why are you surprised at that? Because you have to look at who's watching NXT, who's going to the NXT events, who's watching these things. Not the same people that are watching Raw every week.
Right.
Not the same people that are spending their $9.99 on the pay-per-views.
Right. But then again, you also have to look at the example like Adam Rose. The Adam Rose character was nowhere on NXT. On NXT, he was Leo Kruger. And lots of people liked that. But when they brought him up, they gave him a completely new gimmick and told him to run with it, and that gimmick is falling flat.
Well, and I could have told you it was going to. I mean, really? Rosebuds? That was supposed to work? Like, did Vince McMahon let him on TV, let him on Raw, thinking that would actually get over? No. I got a couple more examples for you. How about Brodus Clay?
All right.
How about, Bo Dallas. Are these guys successful wrestlers right now?
No, their gimmicks definitely are not very successful.
I think Brodus Clay's like selling shoes in Nashville at this point or something, isn't he?
He's on TNA.
Oh, well, even better. I'd rather be selling shoes in Nashville. But, I mean, NXT is what it is. But it's not, and listen, I would argue that the fans of NXT, the guys that, the guys and gals that really put their time into watching NXT and charting the course of these people's careers to see where they're going to go in the future, I would argue that those are probably some of the most dedicated wrestling fans that exist. All right. But unfortunately for them, they aren't the ones who pay the bills in WWE. They're not the mainstream. And Vince McMahon has to market to the mainstream. And the mainstream's not going to get over on a cheap ripoff of the Road Warriors. The mainstream is not going to get off on Rosebuds and Bo leaving. It's just not going to happen. So these guys may be talented performers, but it sounds to me like they're going to be able to prove that in ROH or TNA before they're going to be able to prove it in WWE.
Quite possible.
Or Lucha Underground.
Yeah, there you go.
So, anyway.
Let's see. Usos retained the WWE Tag Team Championships against The Miz and Mizdow.
How sad is it that I forgot they even had the titles?
Really? You know what? Honestly, it just really felt like this match it could have not been on the card, and I don't think anybody would have missed it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally forgot the Usos were even the Tag Team Champions. Because it's like they seem to be the go-to team when Vince needs somebody to just hold those belts now.
Yeah.
You know, he threw them on the Miz and Mizdow for a minute, and that whole thing fell apart. I think Cody and Dustin had them for about a minute, and that whole thing fell apart. The New Age Outlaws had them a year ago, and then that whole thing fell apart. But it seems like he just keeps going back to the Usos when he doesn't know what else to do with those belts. It's kind of like putting the Divas title, swapping it back and forth between AJ and Paige, because he doesn't know what else to do with it.
Right. Well, speaking of Paige, her and Natalya are now buddy-buddy, and they teamed up against the Bella Twins and lost.
Now, does this mean that Paige is now a face, or does this mean that Natalya is now a heel?
They both got cheered as faces.
All right. Because I just can't see Natalya being a heel.
Well, I mean, really how they've booked this whole Divas division the last few months, I mean, because I'm not paying attention to Raw consistently from week to week, a lot of it is confusing the way they match these up and the fan reactions and how the announcers are calling things as to who is a heel and who is a face at any given time. I mean, if you remember, a year ago, Alicia Fox is throwing hissy fits at WrestleMania press conferences and coming out and dumping popcorn and beer on random people and flipping tables over and shit, and now...
And wiping her ass with JBL's hat.
Yeah, and right now she's like over uber baby face. And, it's confusing. 1 minute Paige is feuding with AJ. Is AJ, I thought AJ was a baby face, but she's cutting heel promos and, but then again, Paige I thought was a heel and she goes out there and she's being nice and stuff and, Natalya is, you thought she was a baby face, but then you got Tyson Kidd like dicking her around and then all of a sudden she's sticking up for Tyson.
Yep.
Whenever somebody
and you know what you just described?
Is this a face sticking up for her husband who's just a dick or,
and what's sad about all this, Kev, is that I can't really tell right now whether you're describing what's happening on Raw with these divas or whether you're telling me what happened on last week's episode of Total Divas.
Well, I mean, it's hard because
but that's my point. That's what's sad about this is we've turned the Divas division literally we've turned this into a soap opera. Yeah, this whole division exists on Raw now to support the reality show, not the other way around.
Right, you're right.
We're being the title picture on Raw is being booked around a reality TV show on another network.
Just imagine.
That's what it's come to, man.
Imagine, if you will, how much more successful one of the most infamous WCW World Heavyweight Champions title runs would have went if there was a reality TV show behind them rather than a crappy movie.
And you're speaking, of course, of who?
Damn it, his name just slipped my mind. The one person who never should have held the WCW championship.
David Arquette.
Yes, thank you, David Arquette.
Yeah.
Imagine how much better his run would have went if it was scripted around reality TV today.
That happened about 3 years before Survivor came out, though, so unfortunately that just wasn't to be.
And, let's see. Just going over this card, I just now noticed there was not one singles match on this card. You had 4 tag team matches, a triple threat match, and the Royal Rumble.
Is that a record? Has that ever happened before?
I don't know. I'd have to look. Speaking of records, talked about this over the air. Your final 4 in the Royal Rumble tonight were Bray Wyatt, Big Show, Kane, and Roman Reigns.
Okay, so it was Bray Wyatt, not Dean Ambrose.
What's that?
No, I think it was Dean Ambrose.
Oh,
it was either Ambrose or Wyatt. I don't remember which.
I can't remember now. How sad is that? The show was over like an hour ago and I can't remember. Anyway, looking over the eliminations for tonight, Bray Wyatt had 6, Rusev had 6, Roman Reigns had 6, and Big Show had 5 eliminations on the night. Those 4 men accounted for, 6, 12, 18, 23 out of 30 eliminations by those 4 men.
Amazing. And Kane only had 1 elimination tonight, but it was a very distinguished elimination because that now ties him with Shawn Michaels for the most total Royal Rumble eliminations of all time.
No, he had 4 eliminations tonight.
He had 4?
Yeah, he was 1 behind Shawn Michaels. He is now 2 ahead.
He's 3 ahead now. If he had 4 and he was 1 behind, he's now 3 ahead. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you for setting me straight on that.
Yeah, Kane now holds the record for Royal Rumble eliminations at 42.
And see, boys and girls, this is why Kev and I make a great team. Well, congratulations to Kane. I really do hope this is his last Royal Rumble because I think he's earned a peaceful retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. He may still have a couple of years of wrestling left in him, but I think it's probably about time to continue ramping down his career.
Well, I don't want to see those couple of years though, because I remember a couple of years ago. Well, I remember 4 years ago, Atlanta, Georgia, WrestleMania 27. I was there. I watched Triple H and Undertaker put on an absolute classic match. And and I remember thinking, God, Undertaker looks like he's got a couple more years left in him. I really wish I hadn't said that, because look where he is now. I don't want to see those last couple of years that Kane has left in him. I don't want him to leave every last drop he has on that mat. I want him to quit now while he's still in great shape. You and I were talking about this off the air before the show. Kane's been in WWF/E for 18 years now. And maybe one of the listeners can remind us, but I can't remember a single time in that 18 years that he ever took significant time off for injury. In 18 years. And the guy's in pretty damn good shape now for a dude in his mid-40s. Now, he's not moving around in the ring like he used to, but he's still physically in pretty good shape. I mean, I hope I look like that when I'm 46. But I don't want to see where he's at in 2 years at the rate he's going right now.
Well, I'm telling you now, you were looking through the Undertaker Triple H match with rose-colored glasses, and you still are, because that was, I think, one of Kane's worst, Undertaker versus Triple H. I think that was one of his worst matches, and that was the match right there where I said, I never want to see Undertaker in another match again, but everybody just kept going on about how great it was. It wasn't great. It was one of the slowest matches I had ever seen on a WrestleMania card, and it was mostly the two of them beating the shit out of each other with chairs and sledgehammers. There was nothing really athletic or wrestling about it at all. It was absolutely
all right.
horrible.
I'll qualify my statement then. From a pure mat technician standpoint, no, it was pure crap. Okay, but for what it was a good match. They booked it as a garbage match. They booked it as a junk match where they were literally going to throw the kitchen sink at each other. Okay, that's the way it was booked. And then was it the next year they did it again, and it was Hell in a Cell?
Mm-hmm. And it was a little better then because they actually managed to get some wrestling in, and there was less of the garbage crap in it, but still.
Well, you have to in the cell. I mean, you have to wrestle in the cell. There's just, you don't have access to all that
but still,
shit.
it was absolutely bad. I already saw that people had already been talking for a couple of years about how Undertaker was really slowing down and was really looking bad and the injuries were racking up. That's not been the case with Kane at all. Kane has taken good care of himself, and in the last few years, he's been, don't want to say he's been picky about the matches he's been in, but he has been selective in what he's done in his matches, and he's modified his work rate to where he's not doing a lot of risky things, but he still comes out looking ahead. So I think if he continues doing that, he's still got at least a couple years in him, but I want to see him slow the pace down.
Well, once again, I just, at this point, I want somebody of his caliber to demonstrate that they are smart enough to walk away before it gets to that point. Okay? Now, he's obviously a smart guy. By the way, trivia for you kids out there that don't know this. Kev, you and I have talked about this before. You know what Kane does in his off time? He's an insurance salesman, or he's an insurance company executive in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he does. He owns his own insurance agency. So the guy ain't gonna hurt for money when he leaves this business. All right?
Yes,
and
you
he's probably
got
a job in WWE as long as he wants one. I just don't want to see him in the ring anymore. Now, having said that, I do want to back that up just a tad and say this. I don't want him to go out with this gimmick, this corporate Kane bullshit. This is not how I want to see the Big Red Monster end his career. So I want him to end it soon, but I want him to end it better than this. Whether he returns to the mask or, I don't know how you do this in a way that's befitting this guy and all that he's poured into this business for the last 18 years. But I don't want to see him go out of here on a stretcher, but I do want to see him go out better than where he's at right now.
I don't know. I kind of appreciate the corporate Kane because, there's only so many years that we could believe that this guy is a monster. And
well, but, I appreciated Biker Taker too. But at some point, he had to go back to being the dead man.
Yeah, really the Biker Taker thing, but eventually, like the last couple of years, he's not been the dead man. He's been able to be just the Undertaker.
When Joe Montana retired from the NFL in 1994, he actually signed a one-day contract with the San Francisco 49ers. And the reason he did that is because he wanted to retire as a 49er and go into the Hall of Fame as a 49er because he won 4 Super Bowls with the 49ers, right? In other words, he wanted to go back to where he started to finish his career. Now, he never played another down for the 49ers, but he signed that one-day contract so that he could officially say, I retired as a 49er. It was important to him to retire the way he started. I think that's important for Kane here. I don't want to see him retire as corporate Kane, walking out there and wrestling in his slacks and dress shoes. I want to see him retire as the Kane we've all known for almost 2 decades. To me, this gimmick is a transitional gimmick. And it's not even for his sake. It's for Triple H's and Stephanie's sakes. It gives them a big, believable henchman. Because let's face it, Jamie Noble, Joey Mercury, these guys are believable henchmen. My 6-year-old son could take these guys on. So they had to have Kane play this role because he's big and believable as a henchman, as an enforcer. But I don't want to see him go out like this. I want to see him go out like more, I guess the only way I can put it is in a way that's more befitting a guy that's poured as much as he has into this business.
I don't know. I'm comfortable with Kane where he's at right now, and trying to go back to the mask, other than doing it for a purely nostalgic purpose where, that's just going to be like just like a one night only thing.
His one-day contract to retire.
I don't know. I don't know if you can really do that in professional wrestling, though.
You can. Look at Ric Flair. Ric Flair has been a crowd favorite for decades, right? But then he got involved in this evolution angle where he was the mega heel. He was a part of this mega heel faction, recreating the 4 Horsemen, so to speak. But in the end, he went out as a crowd favorite. They even brought him out to the ring and they loved on him, and everybody in the back came out there to shake his hand and hug him, and the crowd chanted, "Thank you, Rick," and it was this whole thing. That was basically him doing that. He played the asshole through most of the middle of the last decade, but then when he went out as a crowd favorite. I think you can do that. I think it was befitting of Hulk Hogan to return to the red and yellow after being Hollywood Hogan for so many years. And that was an important piece of wrestling history, by the way. That was important that Hogan made that heel turn and that it got as big as it did for a while. But in the end, he needed to return back to who he was. That's just my opinion.
Right, but at the same time, could you imagine Shawn Michaels coming back out as the Heartbreak Kid?
Well, not at this point, because he's been retired for, 5-6 years.
Right, but even at the very, right before his retirement, can you imagine him coming out in the leather chaps and
Oh, the assless chaps.
Yeah, and
now,
showing off his hairy chest, and
I understand your point, and the reason why Shawn Michaels wouldn't do that is because of the life change he made to put that character away. That's a little bit different story. That was an internal decision that he made to change his life from being that guy, because he wasn't just the Heartbreak Kid on camera. He was living that life in the 90s. Like, hardcore living that life. Like, I honestly think if he hadn't made the change he did, the way he was living his life, he might have wound up just like Eddie Guerrero.
Okay, I'll grant you that one.
I think Shawn Michaels changed because he had to. And no, I can't see him going back to that for moral reasons. Because he was a whole different cat back in the 90s. Like, he was a guy that even he hated. So, yeah, that's a little bit different story. But for Kane, my two wishes for him again are that he doesn't, they don't end up having to carry him out of that ring like they did Undertaker last year. And then the other thing is, go back to being who you were. Let us see that one last time, and then you can ride off into the sunset, and there'll be something sort of poetic about that whole thing. That's really all I have to say about that.
Very well. So, here we are at the very end of the pay-per-view and everything. We know that Roman Reigns is on a path to go see Brock Lesnar in the main event for the WWE Heavyweight Championship. It looks like there's going to be something brewing between John Cena and Rusev. What else do you see on the horizon for this pay-per-view?
Probably Triple H, and if that whole stare down with The Rock doesn't pan out into anything, then it's probably going to be Triple H and Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania. The big question is whether Undertaker's going to try to make one last match. I don't see the point. I think once the streak was broken, the whole need for him to be at WrestleMania was, maybe not be at WrestleMania, but the whole need for him to be in action at WrestleMania is gone now. I don't see the need for it anymore. What's the storyline around that? Starting a new streak? The guy's 48 years old.
Yeah, I don't see that either. And plus, with the news last year, that pretty much Undertaker kind of kept to himself and didn't really know anybody in the locker room at all. I think that just kind of goes to show you how far WWE has moved ahead with things, and how he's not the locker room leader anymore. He's not part of the show on a day in, day out basis now.
No, and if Undertaker had stayed backstage and stayed involved in the business all this time, it would be a whole different ballgame. But he didn't. He left. When he's there, he's there, and when he's not, he's not. And that's a very healthy way to do your business when you're in WWE. Chris Jericho does that. When he's there, and when he isn't, he isn't. Now, by the way, on my way out the door tonight, I do want to throw a shout out to Chris Jericho and give him some mad props. This cat hasn't been on TV except for a couple of times in the last few months. But what some of you may not know is that he currently is on tour with WWE right now, doing house shows all over the country. This guy's on the house show circuit right now, but he's not on TV. This guy truly may be the hardest worker in all of entertainment.
Now that's something.
He's out working house shows right now, but you ain't seen him on TV in months, except for a couple of one-offs here and there.
Yeah, I mean, that's something. I mean, without a doubt, the most decorated and accomplished wrestler in WWE history is spending his time not cutting promos on the flagship TV show. He's working house shows.
And you know what that says to me? He's still honing his craft. This guy's still trying to get better at what he's doing, and he's, 43?
Yeah, and he doesn't need to.
No, he doesn't even need to wrestle anymore. He's got podcasts and TV shows and radio shows, and he's on tour with Fozzy all the time. He doesn't even need wrestling anymore, but he's doing it because he loves it. That right there is a lesson that these guys in NXT can take. And Kev, that is all I've got for you.
Alrighty, well, thanks a lot for coming back tonight, Frank, and it was great talking with you about the pay-per-view. Hope our audience enjoyed the show tonight as well. Feel free to give us feedback. You can always hit AngryMarks.com and click on that feedback button. You can hit us up on Twitter at AngryMarks. You can find us on Facebook at AngryMarks. Give us all the feedback. Frank, thank you for joining me tonight. Listeners, we will see you again next time. Don't forget, next podcast coming up is the Raw Reaction right after Raw with Angry Tenzai and Big Vic. And Tuesday nights, we have the Undisputed Wrestling Show with Rick Craig Zane Paisley, and the NWA Continental Champion, the Morning Star, Will Huckabee. Wednesdays, it's Glove Up or Shut Up with Peter H. and Stevie J, talking the best in mixed martial arts, and there is plenty of it every week, so you don't want to miss that. Thursday night, AMP, of course, with Stevie J and Jordan Garber. Friday night, you have the Impact Implosion with Seth Draken and Mike Pullen. TNA Impact Wrestling is back on the air now on